Beautiful.
Okay, so I just want to welcome everyone to our Heart Connect sessions with Shauna Janz in regards to inner strength and resiliency through traumatic loss. So like I mentioned just before we started recording, we are going to be uploading this to our YouTube channel. So if anyone can't make it or would like to, check it out again afterwards, that's definitely not a problem whatsoever. We want to be able to make sure we have all the resources available for everyone. Like I mentioned, if you want to change your name, turn your camera off, that's totally, your choice as to how you would like to be seen, just in case you are on the top part of the screen. We want to welcome everyone, but we just want to start with our land acknowledgement as well. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, let us take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. We reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to care for the lands and strengthen relationships between nations to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous people, their unique histories, homelands, languages, cultural practices, and spiritual beliefs, and how we can move forward together in a respectful and meaningful spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'm sure we probably have a few members from our Mom Stop the Harm Board of Directors here today, so maybe just give a wave if you are one of them. It's always good to be able to put faces and names together. And at this point, I guess I should have actually started with introducing who I am. I talk to so many people and tell that I sort of forget that part every so often. So my name is Tyla Savard, and I am the Stronger Together Canada Program Manager. We oversee making the creation of the Stronger Together program launched all across Canada. And my partner in crime that makes sure that we get things done as well is Antoinette Gravel-Lulette. And she's going to actually tell you a little bit about our program and some details with that. So please go ahead, Antoinette.
Okay, thanks, Tyla. So there's was two programs that started. The first one was Stronger Together BC, and they started with Healing Hearts and Holding Hope in BC, and I believe it was in 2018. And so from there, the Stronger Together BC got funding from the provincial government to be able to roll out those programs. Last year, Mom Stop the Harm applied and got some funding from a SUAP grant, which is a federal grant, which is substance use and addictions. And so we are able to roll out the Holding Hope and Healing Hearts across Canada. So some of you I know are familiar with what those are. For those of you that aren't, Healing Hearts is a bereavement support group for those that have lost a loved one to substance use or substance related death. And Holding Hope is a support group for those that still have a loved one that are struggling with substance use or in recovery from. So if you're interested in any of those programs, I will put my email in the chat, or we have, our Facebook groups that you can make inquiries, or also the website. So that's just a really brief, quick overview. Okay.
Awesome, thanks, Antoinette. So I did pop the Healing Hearts Canada website into the chat window. So that way everyone has that as a reference as well. That also gives you all the list of where to find a group, where to connect to your community, as well as information. Antoinette's information is also on there. So if you're also interested in maybe starting a group in your community, that gives you some more information and who to contact to get more of those kind of details. So the process for today is we're going to just totally turn the floor over to Shauna and let her do her presentation. And normally then we'd give her about 20 minutes, and then we'll start putting questions in the chat window, and then we'll throw questions at her. Any point in time, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat window, and then we'll make sure that Shauna gets them when she gets to that point in her presentation. Then we'll take a bit of Q&A time, have some engagement, and then she also has some exercises in that as part of her presentation for us today to be able to work through. So with all of that, I would love to introduce our speaker. So what does it mean to walk in the world with a broken heart, to carry a loss so deep and yet not have it fully recognized or understood because of societal stigma? What does it mean to grieve, live and continue on even in the face of not feeling hope? In this heart-based and educational conversation, we're going to explore ways to be with grief and trauma that build resiliency and connection alongside carrying the depths of pain from the death of a loved one with substance use poisoning. Everyone is invited to try some simple strategies to soothe the impact of traumatic stress on the body, to reflect on different grief expressions to see what might carry insight and healing for them, and to explore what it means to keep reaching for what they care for. So our presenter today, like I said, is Shauna Janz, and she's been offering support, facilitation, and education in the field of grief and trauma for 14 years. She's been involved with BC Bereavement Society as a trainer for traumatic loss support, and I was a director for 10 years with Learning Through Loss, providing education and support to youth and professionals. She is the founder of Sacred Grief, offering programs in grief and resiliency, and has had the honor to be invited into many diverse communities facing hardship and loss. So please join me in welcoming Shauna today. And the floor is yours, Shauna.
Thank you so much. So wonderful to just see everyone and see the faces here in our Zoom room. And I'm grateful to be here, grateful for the invitation. I'm calling in from the Comox First Nation land, so in the Comox Valley, mid-Vancouver Island. And the nations here are the Satlut, the Sasitla, the Liksun, and the Puntledge people. And they refer to this land here as the land of plenty. And I'm a new resident here in the last 8 months or so, and feeling really grateful to have landed in this plentiful place with such beautiful ecology, a glacier on one horizon that in the First Nations language is referred to as the Whale, and the Salish Sea on the other horizon. So this is where I'm calling in from. And, you know, everything that we speak to today and that I offer is an invitation, and we're speaking about resiliency and inner strength. And you know, this is so mirrored and embodied in Mom Stop the Harm and Stronger Together, and all of the folks that I have met and had a chance to work with. And so what an example of resiliency in action and connection and community coming together and continuing to reach for what you care for. And so I just really want to uplift and acknowledge and recognize, and I'm thankful Tyla and Antoinette here today and everyone else from the Mom Stop Harm and the Stronger Together team. I've had the privilege and honor to be involved in different ways for the past 7 years. I think it was about 7 years ago now, maybe it was 5. When I was living in Victoria, on the lands of the Lekwungen speaking people, I was invited in to offer some facilitation with the Healing Hearts group there. And so that was my first connection with the programs here, and very thankful to have that opportunity and to learn. So as Tyla mentioned in the blurb that she wrote, you know, I've worked professionally in the field of traumatic bereavement for many years now, and it's really, it's really for the folks that have trusted me and have invited me into their experiences that I've learned the most from. I myself have not, I do not have the lived experience of being in substance relationship or having a loved one die to substance poisoning. And yet I've been invited in alongside many who have, or who have experienced different types of traumatic loss. And so I do know, however, what it is to live with trauma in my body and traumatic responses, so that what I bring here today is all an offering that's informed by both my professional training and experience, that's informed by the other people's lives and what I've learned from them, and that's also informed by my own experiences living with trauma in the body, and how to carry that and continue to practice and be in the resiliency that we all have the birthright to be in. So for today, my hope is that what I have to offer will be something, there may be some insights, some little gems that you might take with you that are supportive for you. Also recognizing the very uniqueness of each person's experience here, what you're all carrying in your body, in your heart, in your lived experience, in your connections and relationships. I won't make any assumptions of what that is. And yet knowing that what brings us together is the grief and the heartache around the death of a loved one due to toxic substance poisoning that is overlaid by stigma, and this lands in each of your experiences differently. And so I just want to name that. And what I'm offering today is some both information and some practices that really meet the needs of what happens when we're experiencing traumatic stress and traumatic bereavement, and how to be with that alongside the grief. And the two tend to need something different. And so how do we recognize that? How do we carry that? How do we stay connected to ourselves and one another when that is the lived experience? So again, everything I offer is an invitation. There's choice. Please feel free to have your camera on or off. I will be inviting practices in through the presentation. It's going to be interwoven with throughout. So let me just check. The sound is all good. Logistics are good. Thumbs up. Okay, I see some nods. Okay. And we'll hope that when it comes time for me screen sharing, that goes smoothly also. So to start with, I'm actually going to invite us to all take our eyes off the screen in this moment and just to look around the space that you're in. Just noticing your space. And because we are talking about something that impacts each and every one here and differently, and it can be both unsettling and sometimes illuminating to have some of your own lived experiences shown on a PowerPoint screen or spoken in this way. What I'm going to invite is for you to choose something in your environment in this moment that feels really soothing to look at. So whatever that your eyes might fall on in this moment, I've decided to take in, I have a little bunny ear cactus over on my dresser over there. And so I'm going to invite us in this moment to spend a few moments looking at whatever it is you've chosen in your environment as an anchor of something that is pleasant or soothing to look at. And just in your own way, notice and name what it is that is pleasing about it. So in my experience, the hue of green that this baby cactus has is quite delightful to take in. And the new little budding ears with the fuzzy prickles on it is quite soothing to look at. So that's what I'm noticing. And as you take in whatever object that you've decided to land on, also just notice, how is it that you know this is a pleasing or pleasant experience? How does your body know this? Or your mind? So as I take in my cactus, for example, I've noticed there's just kind of a soothing, calming quality. I've noticed my breath has actually dropped a little bit more into my belly. And I really enjoy the shape and the textures that I'm bringing in. It brings me a sense of calm. So just notice for a few more moments how it is that you know this is a soothing object to take in. And then I'll invite you just to notice your feet wherever they are. If they're on the ground, noticing your feet, the sense of your feet, and noticing your seat. So noticing the weight of your body on the chair or the couch or wherever you're at. At any point today in this presentation and in our conversation afterwards, if at any point anything feels a little bit too much or just hits too much home, or something's coming up, I invite you to go back to that anchor, that soothing anchor in your environment. Maybe you mute me for a moment and really just spend some breaths with that soothing anchor. And we're working directly with our nervous system, and we're gonna get a whole lot more into this in a moment. So that is my invitation as a place of resource throughout our time together. And I do the same thing. I do this all the time. Wherever I go, I choose something in the environment that I can look to that brings a sense of resource and anchor for me, especially when we're coming together to talk about what it means to live with traumatic stress and to live with heartbreak. So let me get into some screen sharing, and I'll be likely bopping in and out of this view a few times. So let's hope that it works here. And can everyone see that screen? Resiliency through traumatic grief. Is that working, Tyla?
Yeah, we can totally see it's in your presentation mode, or in your work mode versus presentation mode.
So this is interesting. For me, it's in presentation mode, but I've noticed when I've tried to do this before, it stays in work mode. So you're actually seeing my desktop with the slides near the side. Is that what
we
you're
see
saying?
like your main slide and then your slides on the side. We don't see anything else on your desktop. We just see your PowerPoint.
Okay, well, that is just gonna have to be what it is, and that is fine. So it's presentation mode for me, and it's work mode for you, but you can see the slide okay, yeah? Good, okay. Thank you, technology. We will collaborate here and work through it. So I'd like to spend a little time first talking about, my aim here is to get at the essence of trauma, the essence of grief expression in ways that are practical and pragmatic, so that you feel that at the other side of our time together, there's practical things that you can walk away with that are going to be supportive for you. So my goal here is not to give a whole bunch of information on trauma or nervous system, but to talk about the essence of things and the ways that I've best learned how to kind of boil it down. So as you all know, because you're living it, is that when there's trauma, what is a trauma response? So we are not our trauma, but trauma is how our body and our nervous system is responding to an experience. And in the essence of that, trauma is something that is either too much for too long. So in this case, maybe it's the individual stress that you've been under for so long. Maybe it's the ongoing societal stigma and the different layers of non-adequate responsiveness from our larger government policies, etc. It's going too long, too much for too long. It might be the experience of navigating care amidst your loved one's relationship to substance, or amidst their death experience, or if you're someone who's here because there's people you love in this experience and people you love who are caring for those in this experience. There's a too much for too long. And what happens is we start to respond with trauma in our body. Maybe it's the ongoingness of uncertainty. Trauma is also anything that happens that's too little for too long. Too little for too long. Again, maybe this is that lack of adequate response from structures, from government, from community levels. Maybe it's too little respite, too little of feeling resourced and tended to in the ways that you need because of the ongoing stress. I do know that part of the story that many people carry is when going through certain experiences of loss, of traumatic bereavement, there's always a surprise at who does show up and who doesn't. And so we hold all of that, and that's going to look different for everyone here. We can also, in similarly but slightly different words, what is trauma? Trauma is something that happened that should not have. the death of your loved one, the fact that there is an opioid crisis happening right now. What happened that should not have. And also what didn't happen that should have. What didn't happen? In a culture that disenfranchises this type of traumatic loss, it is either deemed by the broader society as illegitimate or not worthy, or it goes silenced. What kind of responses of care and love and support maybe aren't happening that should be? So let's take a pause here, because I really recognize that this will land with each of you, and I'm sure you see some of your experiences in every single ways of framing what happens when something is traumatic. So I'm actually going to invite intentionally in this moment for us all to again take our eyes off the screen and to look into that soothing anchor for a moment, and just inviting in again those soothing qualities. And feeling your feet, feeling your seat, and taking a moment of respite here. And we do this purposefully. And we'll speak more about that in a moment. So how do we respond when there's ongoing stressors and our body starts to respond with trauma? What does that look like? It's either too much energy. So we've all heard of that fight, flight energy. This is that stuck onness. We have a lot of extra charge and extra energy in us. This is also that high freeze. So this tends to be the place where we feel more anxiety. We feel kind of go, 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 do. There's oftentimes a sense of urgency, difficulty slowing down. We oftentimes in this place have a hard time with our memory, or we will feel sudden intense emotions, or get a sense of feeling out of control. And this is just some possibilities. Again, we're not going to go into the full details, but my invitation is just to notice when my body, my nervous system might be going into a too muchness response. And when I say high freeze there, this is like the deer in the headlights freeze. This is I'm frozen, but I'm so full of activated potential energy. I know that I'm going to be able to either zoom off this way or jump that way, and I'm just getting ready. So it's that high potential, highly there's a lot of energy here in that freeze, the deer in the headlights. And so it is below our consciousness. Our body, our nervous system is responding this way. This is actually just how we're hardwired. And the more we can bring understanding or awareness to when our body might be doing this, then there's certain things we can do to meet that response, to create more resiliency within. So that too much energy is at the essence of it. Protection through mobilizing. We are ready. We are gonna go, go, go. And things are going to be fast, and it's going to be do. And it's a protective response to keep us safe through mobilizing. Again, this is happening below our rational thoughts. We're working very much with the creature, animal part of ourself. But of course, it comes out in our everyday relationships and how we perceive the world and the stories that we carry and what we feel is possible or not. So the other way our body responds is in that too little energy. And this is what most people think of it as the freeze, but we call it the low freeze. This is the dead possum response, where everything just kind of goes limp. It's the last resort. There's a feeling of collapse. And that's what our nervous system is doing, because it was hardwired to do this. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with this. It's when we get stuck here. And how does that look for us? Well, we may feel constant fatigue or exhaustion. It may come as more depression, numbing, dissociation, an inability to find words, feeling helpless, hopeless, feeling shame, like what's wrong with me? Why can't I just do this or that? And this is our body's way of saying, I need to protect you through immobilizing, through shutting down. So just take a moment here. As I've said these things, you might recognize some of us have a default. When a body is under traumatic stress for the conditions that we've named in the slide before, and because of the layers of stigma that is stressful, some of us tend to have a default. Do we get kind of stuck on with that too much energy? Do we get kind of stuck off? Do we toggle between the two, which is very common also? And again, there is nothing wrong with you when this happens. It is the body's response to this traumatic stress. And when we can bring some awareness to it and recognize where we're at, then we can respond to it. So in this moment, I would like to invite another practice. And this one is simply, so in these practices, we are working to speak with our nervous system. So this is, again, below the rational thought. We're speaking to the back brain. And they're very simple practices, but they have profound results when they become something that we do often. So my invitation here is to orient around your environment. It's called orient. So I'm going to invite you to look around your environment again. And really notice textures, notice colors, notice shapes. And if it's available for you, look up also. Look behind you, even if you know it's just a wall there. What we're doing right now, as we orient all around, up, below, around, we are speaking to our nervous system saying, you are safe. You don't need to be caught in fight, flight, or freeze. You can settle now. So I also invite you to notice where your windows are, where your door is. Notice the clear path of exit. So again, rationally, it's like, yeah, I know I'm here in my living room. I'm on my own. But we are speaking to the back brain. We're speaking to the amygdala. We're speaking to the nervous system. And it's a type of whispering, like whispering to our nervous system. We can calm. We can settle. We don't need to be in protective strategies right now. So again, notice your feet and notice your seat. And just notice if anything has shifted for you. It's not uncommon that when we practice these things, we may start to yawn or we take a big in-breath. There might be more saliva in your mouth. Your eyes might water a little bit. You might feel a little bit tired or more relaxed. These are all cues that your body is responding like, oh, okay, there's safety here. Body level. So let me pause for a moment and come out of screen share just for a moment, just because I'd like to see people's faces and responses a little bit. And it's, so I'm just coming in to like connect. And I'm going to put my view in gallery view for a minute. And just look at your faces here and just to see and to offer some connection. And I see some videos coming back on. Yeah, good. You know, even through Zoom and videos that we're so used to now after 2 years or more, the sense of connection is so important. One thing that helps to melt away those protective strategies is our sense of connection. So taking a moment to take one another in, knowing that we're gathering here because there are threads of common heartbreak and resilience that bring you all together. And that is important. That is important. Okay. So maybe just give me some twinkle fingers if everything is landing okay and paced and like, yeah, see something. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go back to screen share. Thank you for that. Okay. So I'm just inviting you to continue bringing some curiosity as I speak to these essences, feeling into like, oh yeah, I can recognize that response in me or at these certain moments. So when we're talking about now trauma and grief, traumatic bereavement, traumatic loss experiences where there's ongoing stress, where our bodies continue to receive cues that we need to be in protection mode. All normal. All normal. There's no judgment around this. There's no shame. It's how our bodies respond, and we can work with it. It's all workable. When we're in traumatic bereavement, there's kind of two opposing energies or movements that sit in our body, because trauma, which is protection strategies, has the energy of contraction, of pulling away and getting tight, whether that be in the too much energy ready to fight or in the starting to collapse. Trauma is a pulling away. Whereas grief, when it's not overlaid by trauma and a trauma response, actually has the energy of expansion and a moving towards. Grief wants to talk about our loved one. Grief wants to see the picture of our loved one on the mantle. Grief wants to share memories. Grief wants to come together, wants to be witnessed, wants to be listened to. So when we have two energies in our body, when trauma does overlay the grief, then all of a sudden the trauma is like, no, I can't look at the picture. It's too much. It's overwhelming. I can't go there. I need to protect myself. This hurts too much. I don't have the resources. And so you may notice this push-pull that can happen, whether it's something that you recognize as more of a steady state of what you're experiencing, or in moments. So trauma is like, ooh, can't go there. Whereas grief naturally is like, I want to go there. I want to remember, I want to honor, and I want to continue reaching for what I care about and speaking and connecting on these things, despite the profound heartbreak and pain and confusion that's there. So when trauma overlays grief, the trauma actually needs to be tended to first. We need to work with our nervous system and our body to start to relax and dissolve and tend to that contraction, that pulling away, that protection, so that the grief can be met more directly, if that makes sense. So when, I'm going to invite a few more practices in. So if you're someone that has recognized that your body is responding with trauma in a way that's in that kind of shutdown, it's in that too little energy, it's in that lethargy, that depression possibly, in that hard to get momentum, hard to feel hopeful. One of the things, because we're working with the body, is when we're in protection mode, all of our energy leaves our arms and legs in that state and goes to the midline of our body. And so this may sound silly, but we actually need to remind our body and our nervous system that we have arms and legs, that we have choice and agency to get away, because our body is responding as in like, I have no other choice right now but to immobilize. And so the exercise is simple. We're simply bringing some touch to your arms and to your legs. So if it feels okay in this moment, my invitation is to explore what kind of touch or massage, gentle squeezes or rubs feel good for me right now on my arms. What does it feel like to feel the edges of my arms? Same with our hands. It's like we're waking up our arms, we're waking up our hands. And one of the fastest ways to tending to our body and nervous system is actually through the hands. There's so many nerves in our hands that map onto our body. And so we can do this anytime by massaging our fingers, massaging our palms, spending some moments like what feels good right here, right now? What kind of pressure? And then I invite you also to bring some attention to your legs. So it might just be your thighs, or if you have access to go all the way down to your feet. But again, just bringing some touch. It's like we're waking up. And again, here we are talking to our brain stem and to our nervous system saying, hey, you don't need to be immobilized. You have arms and legs. You have choice. You can walk away. You can run if you wanted to. And just notice, you might notice some yawns coming through. You might notice a bit more energy or a little bit more relaxing. All of that is normal. And these are cues that our body is starting to it's called down regulate, to come into more regulation. Now, if you're someone who is recognizing that you're in that too much energy state, which is that fight, flight, the hypervigilance, the go, 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 the extra energy, the sense of urgency, then what we want to do, this might be too much. If you are in more of that collapse state, then this would likely be too vigorous, too much for you. But if you are in that go, 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 what actually needs to happen is not just the waking up of the limbs, it's actually discharging all that extra energy. So we're going from that deer in the headlights and we're kind of like shaking it out, right? So we're shaking our limbs. You could stand up and kind of shake your legs a little bit or roll your ankles around. And it's just like, whew, let's discharge some of that extra energy that is caught up in our body. Again, we can bring this into any moment. And so the more you recognize, oh, where am I right now? Am I in more of a collapse? Do I need some gentle waking up? Or am I in a go, go, go and I need to discharge some of this extra energy? So that's the invitation there. So what are some of the other, what is the medicine here in, you'll get the click to add title. That's okay. We're turning protection into connection. That is what we are doing through nervous system practices. This supports resiliency in our body. When we can start to work with and recognize when our body is in that trauma response, which is all based in protection through mobilizing or immobilizing, and we can start to have practices, somatic practices that work with our neurobiology. What we are doing is we are creating resiliency within our nervous system. We are saying, yes, there's ongoing stress in my life, and I have practices to start to build and deepen into places of ease for myself and calm and soothing through simple practices that are quite profound that work with my brainstem and my nervous system. Why is this so important? Our nervous system state impacts our psychology. It impacts our perceptions in the world, our capacities for relationship to self, to other, to our surroundings. It influences our stories that we're telling ourselves about the world and our place in it or what is possible. When we are in protection mode, it impacts how we see and how we receive information, and how we sense or not a connection with possibility and future. And so by doing these simple somatic exercises, we are actually like feeding the roots, providing a whole lot of nourishment to our body, which supports our mind and supports our capacity to be in connection. And that is the medicine. That is why I paused for a moment out of my screen share, because the moments of connection are so important. How can you invite more and more connection as a practice in your life? This helps to dissolve those protective, automatic responses based in traumatic stress. So we talked about the soothing anchor, and I invited that in. we just did that orienting to the environment where we really noticed what is in our environment. What can I see? What can I hear? I can hear the wind outside my window right now, and I can hear some birds, and I can hear the low hum of a fridge in the other room. Small moments like this where we bring some presence to our senses, to what we see, what we hear, what we feel. So just even in this moment, take a moment. What can you feel? And I mean the actual, I feel my sweater and the weight of my sweater on my arm. I feel some of my hair against my jawline right here. I feel like I need a glass of water. We pause, we get connected with our needs and our choice. So spend a moment here. Do you need something? Does something about you need some attention? Looking at pathways of exit anytime you come to a new place. Maybe, perhaps some of you here are peer facilitators for Healing Hearts or Holding Hope. And maybe you invite the folks that are gathering in whatever space you are, if you are meeting in person again, to take a moment and have everyone notice where the exits are and the pathways of exit. Again, it's not something rational, but we're speaking with the nervous system and allowing a certain soothing and calming and grounding to happen. We talked about waking up the arms and legs and either slowly waking them up or discharging them. Now I'm also going to offer a few exercises that are based in what's called bilateral stimulation. So our bodies are quite fascinating. When we are in a stress response, whether it's in a moment or ongoing, what tends to happen is our left brain turns up, which means our sense of urgency turns up, and our sense of kind of either or thinking also turns up. We get really kind of heavy on the left side of the brain. So the bilateral stimulation works with the bridge between the two hemispheres, the corpus callosum, to bring more energy back to the right side of the brain. So there's coherence and a holistic, like all of us is working together. So a few ways to bring in some bilateral stimulation. This most simple is just rocking back and forth. And I'm actually going to stop sharing again to see you all. Simply rocking back and forth, feeling the weight of your body shift from side to side. And the beauty thing about this is when we do it together, technical names, shared rhythms, is also very supportive for connection. So as we kind of all sitting, just rocking, and there's a reason why as babies, we typically like to be rocked. There's something profoundly soothing to the nervous system. And although this isn't bilateral stimulation, this just came to me. Another one is, I learned this from one of my teachers, adult thumb suckling. We actually take a gentle hold on one of our thumbs. We can do that so nonchalantly, no one needs to know. But there's actually something super calming about holding a thumb. And it's connected to certain energy meridians in our body. So just notice for a moment. You may even kind of shift your feet one by one at a time. Like push into the ground a little bit with each foot. And just notice how your body responds to that. I tend to notice I start to take bigger inhales. So another bilateral option is the butterfly hug. So as if you're a kid, putting your thumbs together. Putting your thumbs together and just a nice soft tapping. We call this a butterfly hug. Some of these, the proof is kind of in the pudding. You try them on. Some of them feel like, yeah, that really works for me. Others may be like, meh, not so much for my nervous system. It's nice to have options and choice. And then the final bilateral movement that I'll invite includes the eyes. And so what's really curious here is that our ocular nerve, the nerve that connects with our eyes, is very much connected to whether we are feeling in a kind of dysregulated, protective trauma response place, or whether we're in a regulated, connected place. Because when we're in those strategies of protection, when our body responds that way, our ocular nerve really tightens and starts darting around and scanning the environment for threat. It's just what our body does. It's that very creaturely animal part of ourselves. So one way is to stretch our ocular nerve, which tells our nervous system, you're okay. You can settle. You can be soothed here. Very simple. You're just going to one side, looking at the 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock with your eyes, not to strain them, but to really notice the periphery of your field of vision to one side. And you stay there for a moment until you feel some kind of release. For me, it's always a yawn, and I come back to center. It may be a slow uptake in your breath. It may be a very slight relaxation cue. Then we come back to neutral, and then we'll go to the other side also. So looking at the 9 or the 3 o'clock, the other way. And then when that feels complete, I invite you to just notice, what does your body need right now? I feel like I need to stretch and take up a bit more space. It can take anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds for our nervous system to really land and integrate these practices. And stretching is a great one. What's cool too is as soon as we stretch our arms up above our head, it naturally drops our diaphragm and invites a deeper breath. It just happens. It's like kind of magical. So that's always a quick way to bring in a little bit more connection to self, to breath. Good. So again, I'm just going to check in with everyone. I've got just a few more slides. What I want to move on to is now talking a bit more about grief and grief expression. Just give me a little sign, maybe some twinkle fingers again. Moving on feels good and right. Yep, seeing a lot of twinkle fingers. Great. Okay, I will go back to screen share. Thank you. Okay. So, as I mentioned, when traumatic stress or trauma responses are happening in our body, it always overlays the grief. And so if we can start to tend and meet some of those responses first, start to dissolve them, start to bring some soothing and regulation and coming back into that connective place, then it's like our grief is more accessible. It's always there. It's always there. And to bring awareness and love and care and attunement to our grief, sometimes we need to melt away some of those protective trauma responses first. So this, it's going to stay on this slide for a few moments here. This is work that's informed by Terry Martin and Kenneth Doka, who speak a lot to different styles of grief expression, how grief wants to move to be expressed in the world. And I've also added some of my own insights to this model, and I'll let you know when that is, just so you have clarity there. So research has shown in a Western context anyways, I wouldn't say this is multicultural, but it's definitely in a Western context, is that there's tends to be different ways that the energy of grief though wants to move through us. And again, we're talking about the essence of things here. And so the most common in terms of what gets the most attention and what tends to be focused on in the field of grief is the heart center being the place where our grief and our emotions want to come through. So for those of you who may be more of a heart, or in Terry Martin and Kenneth Doka's word, it would be called the intuitive style of grieving. This is folks who really are in the affect. They want to be in the emotions. They want to be in all the feelings. They're the folks who tend to really love support groups, to be able to connect with others on that heart level way, to speak and share the stories. They're the ones who typically find journaling really supportive. And it's all about processing and being with the emotions, being with the feelings, speaking them, sharing them. Beautiful. And one of the limitations of only having that heart affect way is that sometimes we might find ourselves always in it and not really allowing the grief to then move and metabolize and change, allowing the emotions to run their course and be released. Now, this is the heart center is the one that gets most attention, and typically it can be easy to fall into some kind of judgment of others or self. Like, if we're not crying, then we're not grieving, or if we're not, in the emotions, then we're not grieving. And it can cause a lot of maybe uncertainty or confusion in homes or between relationships, right? A lot of shoulds about what grief can or cannot look like. The other center of grieving is the head, which in their model they call the instrumental grievers. These are the folks that the energy of grief is actually transmitted more through the head, through the thinking about, the wanting to do projects in memory of, the making meaning of the loss, the change, the transition. It's the folks who want to plan to put the plaque up or to create a memorial or to create a scholarship fund in the memory of. In this situation, it may be the folks who are really galvanized to do the advocacy work, to work at policy level changes in honor of, as a way of expressing the heartbreak and the grief. Beautiful. And one of the limitations here is that if we're only in that way, we may sometimes forget to feel. So we want both. We may forget to really be in the experience of the emotions that we're experiencing. Now, what was left out of this model by these Western researchers, and this is typically happens in our culture, is the body is forgotten as a very important part of our experience, right? We tend to focus a lot on head. We're learning how to come into heart and really needing the body. And the body is about grief expressing through the things that are underneath our consciousness, unless we choose to make them conscious, like we've been talking about here. What are the sensations that are happening? What are the movements that my body needs underneath any story or consciousness? And what this is called is somatic completion. What are the natural movements? When you have a yawn, you feel the yawn come up, you have this big expressive yawn, and then you settle and it kind of feels soothing after the yawn and you feel more relaxed and settled. That is an example of a somatic completion. And that happens in our grief many times over and over, and we need to allow that to happen in our body. Is that making sense the way I've explained that? Just, I can only see a few heads, but nodding. Okay. So ideally, our grief expression is a balanced blend between head, heart, and body. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here that there's likely one that really jumps out for you, is like, whoa, yeah, that's me, totally. And where are you being invited to perhaps bring a little bit more attention to the other ways of also allowing grief to express? So I'm going to give one analogy or example about how this can play together, which I have found to be really illustrative of this. Let's say there's two people who both find, let's say, movement really important for them. Let's say it's dance as a way to express and be in the body and the sensations of their grief. Dancing is one. The person who may default a bit more to the head way of expressing grief would likely be the person who chooses a playlist based on the lyrics of each song and the meaning those lyrics have, and orders them in a way that makes sense and tells a story. And they may even then plan and choreograph what their dance is going to look like and what each movement is going to mean. And then they're going to put on their playlist and they're going to dance the choreography. And that is the like head and body way of expressing grief. Whereas the person who is more heart and emotions may be more someone who's like, I'm just going to put it on my favorite playlist because I know those songs move me, and I'm just going to I'm just going to press play, and I'm going to go where my body and my emotions want me to go, and it's going to be free form, and I'll just know when it's complete because I'll have that intuitive sense. And that's their style of expressing the grief. So you can see the essence is a little bit different, and how might we bring all of those in any given moment. So I offer this with an invitation to bring some curiosity. How does your grief tend to want to naturally express? Where are some places where you might invite in a little bit more heart, or a little bit more head, or a little bit more body? How might that change or add to what it is you need or want in terms of support, in terms of being met in your grief? For those of you who are facilitators, how might this inform what types of activities and reflections you invite into a group that helps to match all three types and to work towards a blending together? So I'll be curious about any questions that arise around any of this. I have one more slide, and then I'll close this and we'll open up to conversation, discussion, questions. In the blurb of this time together, I said something about like how do we live with such extreme heartbreak? How do you live with such extreme heartbreak while still continuing to reach for what you care for? And again, I just really want to hold up the community and connection that is Mums Stop the Harm and Stronger Together, because this is a living example. All of this right here is the community, the connection, the resiliency. And from what we've just talked about in terms of understanding the nervous system, and understanding that when there is traumatic stress and our bodies are responding that way, when we go into modes of protection, we get cut off from the natural states of curiosity, awe, hope, gratitude, beauty seeking. When we start to dissolve the trauma responses, working with them, when we start to come out of protection and back into connection with ourselves, with one another, from this place naturally arises. It is our birthright. Naturally arises these capacities, this resiliency that connects us to our curiosity, to our sense of hope, to our sense of awe, to our sense of gratitude. And so I'm not coming here with any answers, no definitives on anything. We all have unique experiences. And my curiosity, my invitation is, what would it be like to think of hope as a practice rather than a feeling, rather than a very specific vision, or alongside the feeling, alongside a specific vision that you're working towards? What would it mean to make hope a practice every single day? What might it mean to wake up in the morning and say, this is how I'm going to practice hope today? And again, the fascinating aspect of this is that when we are working and being attuned to our own nervous system and whatever state we are in, If we are in protective states, if we're in responses that are dysregulated or in stress, our brains naturally start to scan the environment for threat. And we start to only do that. This is below our consciousness. It's happening from back brain. And this is called the negativity bias. Under stress, we are hardwired to start only focusing on the places of disconnect, the places of possible threat, the places of negativity, the worst case scenarios. We are hardwired for this, and it's workable. If we know this piece, then part of our practice to actually meet grief is to also bring in practices of choosing to look for places of beauty, to bring in practices of gratitude, to make hope a practice. And when we invite this in, when we spend a moment to stop and like really take in something that feels beautiful or soothing to us, this is not bypassing the grief. This is actually helping to dissolve those trauma responses. We make it a practice, trauma responses start to dissolve. The more they dissolve, the more gratitude, awe, curiosity, hope naturally starts arising. And we continue practicing them. So we work with it. We bring it consciously. We choose. And at the essence of healing from traumatic stress, from traumatic bereavement, so that we can be in the heart of our grief and hold the heartbreak, is to also invite in and know that we have a birthright, and as part of our dignity as humans, to also take in the beauty, to find the small places of gratitude. And this supports the melting away of the trauma, the dysregulation, the protection strategies. So I'm going to stop my share here. And let's take a moment to end off the presentation before we invite in conversation and questions. I invite you to take in, see if you can kind of like, with new eyes, look around your environment and choose to see some places of beauty that you might not have seen before. Like, choose. Notice how your body responds to that. Again, this is not about bypassing the pain, grief. This is actually supports our capacity to be with it, to be in the grief and the gratitude. Okay, so I welcome conversation, questions, curiosities, what landed, what didn't, what needs some clarity.
So Shauna, we do have one, we didn't have any questions coming up. I think everyone was just so engrossed in your sharing and what you're putting up there for us, which is wonderful. But we do have one comment that was asking, I understand heart and head, but I don't quite understand the body as a way of expressing grief. So if you can maybe go into that a little further for us.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Great question. And it makes sense. That is a very common response because there's been so little attention in our Western culture to body and to embodied presence. We're kind of like walking heads around, and it's because our culture conditions us to be very much in our head. That is what I would say, like a cultural wounding. And so to be in the body, and this is another kind of paradox of it, is that it's below our thinking, rational, understanding mind. So it's hard to put in words to bring it to understanding. My invitation to that question would be, grief has an energetic reality. All emotions do. You know, emotions are energy in motion, if you've heard that expression before. That includes our grief. Grief has a very somatic, physical, and you will know this because who here feels grief in their body. All of a sudden their body's getting sore. They may experience like very body level responses. You may be getting sick more often because it actually lowers your immunity. Like there is a physical reality to grief through the body. And yeah, I'm seeing I'm going to just open up the chat here so I can also see what's coming through. Right. So movement modalities are very supportive for this. It's underneath the story, it's underneath our consciousness typically, but understanding that the brain body connection is real. Grief has an energetic and physical reality, and it needs to be met with energetic physical movement or tending or awareness or mindfulness to feel the sensations. So feelings and emotions are one thing, sensations are something different. Sensations is me tuning in this moment and feeling things like a bit of tightness in my neck, some buzzing in my fingers, some tingling in my lips, and a sense of bubbliness in my belly. That's me tuning in and bringing awareness to body level through sensations. That's supportive. Dance, yoga, walking, tai chi, whatever the movement is. It's just making sure that the body is also processing what's happening. I hope that it feels adequate as a response in this moment.
And we also have Janie Ann who has her hand up. So if you want to go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I really was open and resonating with a lot of what you've been sharing here, Chance. And I do practice mindfulness meditation, and I'm in the process of becoming a mindfulness meditation teacher as well. This is the area where I will be doing most of my work in is grief. I am as a result of losing my son and Adam in April 12, 2018 to overdose. And the stigmatization and the stigma that I've had to deal with around that. But the point that I want to get across is about exactly what you're speaking about, the body. What happens to the body? So when I heard of his passing, my breath left me. It left my body. From that time on, I've suffered with asthma. So it manifested, in the physical condition in my body. And I'm a non-smoker as well. And since I've started to do a lot of work, with my mind, my mind and my body connection, to do the work there and to begin to align with all the beautiful energy in the world and the energy of other people, and not being alone with it, my breathing has become a lot better. And it's the thing that I felt grateful for this year was that I could breathe without coughing. It may not seem like a lot to other people, but to me, like it actually made me cry the first time I could do that, without having all my inhalers and things around me. And I am having to continue to use this medication for sure, but I find that I use it less. I'm having to use it less. And I wanted to share that. Does that, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Janie. Yeah,
I don't have a question. I just needed to see if I was on
Thank
track.
you.
I'm on track, but I don't know. And that's okay, right? Thank you. Thank you.
I really appreciate what you shared, Janie Ann, and just a lot of compassion to you and to Adam, and for giving us an example of a body level response. And there's something that you also said in there. It was very brief, but like you said something to the extent of also in connecting with others, so I didn't feel so alone. And I just want to really uplift in this moment that connection piece. It's so important. Like, I'm going to bring it back to the neurobiology, to our nervous system, but we are hardwired for connection. And what trauma responses does and stigma is it separates us. It wants to kind of isolate us. We start to feel isolated in those protective strategies. And so when we can start to invite and choose, what are the places where I can feel and sense and create connection, that in itself starts to dissolve those protective places. And of course, like it just also to name, when we are in protective strategies, it shows up in our body usually as constriction, like actual protection, body tightening up, bracing for the thing. Oftentimes the thing in stigma, it's ongoing, or it's the thing that already actually happened, but we did not have the support or the resources or the connection at the time to allow us to feel and be with it on a body level. But we can do that now. We can meet those needs now. So I'm going to invite everyone, let's take our eyes off the screen again for a moment, because I know it just lands differently for everyone. And I want to take a pause, because this is how we practice resiliency. I want you to invite you to look at that soothing anchor, or do some bilateral stimulation. You might rock a little bit. You might stretch. You might pulse your feet, or bring some attention to your hands, or something different. But this is how we do this. We pause. We stop that sense of urgency. We slow down. We bring attention to our body. We whisper to our amygdala by looking around and orienting to our space. We are safe. You can settle. You can soothe. Yeah, good. So I'm open if there's, I do see something in the chat, so let me just scroll through the chat here for a moment. Yeah, good. Yeah, beautiful. Yes, yes, yes.
So if anyone does
Thank you
have any
for,
questions, definitely please, feel free to either, use the the reactions to raise your hand, or pop it in the chat, and then we can to continue our engagement if there's anything that anyone would like to be able to speak to. So we'll just give it a moment. So if there are any questions or comments to come up, and then Shauna will just continue on with what else you'd like to share with us today.
So there's something that came through in the chat as a direct message. I'm just going to invite that to, if that person wants to speak it instead, I invite that, but I just want to give choice here.
Yes,
Kiona? Oh, so I'm just going to go to Kiona for a moment, and then Karen to you, okay? I think it's Karen who is speaking there. So Kiona, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for letting me chat. And I actually didn't know what I was stepping into when I came onto this forum. Side note, Sui Gorup is my family, and she's the mother to my half brother and my stepsister, who passed away a month ago. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
So what I mentioned in my little private message was about anticipatory grief, because I didn't understand why my body wasn't reacting to grief, why my body wasn't reacting to trauma, why my body wasn't reacting the way it should be, as if it would be on TV. And I actually had to Google it, Google doctor. And so I'm like, why am I not crying? What is wrong with me? And I discovered anticipatory grief. And she was supposed to make it 27 years young. And it's, so where was I trying to go with this? I think when I was reacting to like how our body reacts, it's a roller coaster ride, and it may not, you may not get off that ride for a long time, and sometimes you won't even know that you're on a roller coaster ride because you're back into normality until the trigger point will happen. And so I was wondering, on your thoughts of how long you've kind of seen these and how long they go for. And we all react differently on how we deal with grief, and sometimes we judge ourselves like, is this normal? So for example, we had the Indigenous traditional funeral for her within a week. And then it was go, go, go. So it was no time to actually sit down, relax, and be in thought to cry or to, except at times there was, but to actually just sit there and not do anything, because that's not how it always goes. And then afterwards, when I was in silence, when everything was done, I felt so heavy and so deep in thought that I felt the changes in my body, and I knew I had to do something about it. I knew I had to take those steps. My reaction was, I need to go. I need to get out of my home. I need to get out of the city. I needed to get out of the country. I left. And when I was abroad, I spent time with some of my closest friends, and all I could do is talk about the story over and over and over and over. And and moments I would distract myself by going to a music concert, and then I would feel guilty for that. And but then when I would have those quiet moments where I was staying, I would feel that heavy part again. So I would repeat, try and find the fun. And I feel like I was like, I shouldn't be having fun right now. I shouldn't be carrying on something. I should be grieving still. And I don't know how to react with those emotions, I guess you can say. I'll keep it a little bit shorter. I'm probably chatting and chatting.
I just want to acknowledge and honor everything that you've shared, and there's just so much here. And if it feels okay, Kiona, do you mind sharing the name of your stepsister?
Yeah.
Would that feel okay?
Some of you may know her from Vancouver Island, because her father just passed away in October, former Chief Wayne Edwards, and so his daughter Wolody Gorup Edwards, and she's beautiful. She still is, like, I'm not saying was, I'm saying is, because she's still with us in presence. And I think there are some good lessons from her story that I hope that our family will be bringing to the table to others to hopefully prevent it again. But it's a statistic, and again, when it comes to stereotypes or stigma is the word I'm trying to find. Then it's one more thing when I have to explain, how do I make this where I'm not defending my people, but more just like, it's not just us, it's everyone, but we're more noticeable because we are minority. So
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all that you share. And I just want to spend a moment to just, for all of us to be with what you just shared. And Kiona, if it feels okay in this moment, just to know that it's being received, that you have a community here who are witnessing you, who are helping to hold the pain of this. And so whatever way that it feels okay in this moment, just to receive that acknowledgement. We are here. You are in connection. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I can speak there's just one thread that feels like it really wants to be in the space alongside everything you've just shared, which is the humanity of what it means to walk alongside this type of experience, this death. And because of the level of stigma and disruptions and the legacies of genocide and colonialism and oppressive systems, there's been a breakdown, and it impacts all of us differently depending on our ancestry, depending on our lived experiences, depending on our places of privilege. It impacts us all differently, but it impacts us all. There's been breakdowns in what it means to be in grief together, to know the skills of grieving. And so we have all these questions, we have these stories of shoulds, we have certain names for things that can be supportive and helpful and can add some understanding, yes. And what I want to say is, and the research shows also, folks who have community, who have intact rituals, ways of coming together, ways of sharing in food, ways of coming together to honor, to sing, to move. And this is a birthright to us all. Some of us are connected for many generations from these intact cultural practices. Grief, we are forever changed by our grief, and we are meant to carry our grief differently through time. And when there's a breakdown in our cultural story about these ways of coming together, grief starts to show up differently because of that lack of connection and support. It is not an individual failing. So this is my hope and my invitation, is that when anytime any of us come into the stories of, am I doing this right? Should it be like this? And the ways you can quickly make it like, I'm doing it wrong. I somehow don't have the strength, or I don't have the resiliency, is to like pause and just know that like it is not an individual, it is not your failing. There is a cultural wound here that has happened, that has disconnected many of us from the skills of grieving in connection. And so I want to uplift, Kiona, your grief, the way that you're aware of it, the ways that you're noticing right now. I'm using a strategy of distraction and joy. Beautiful. And right now I'm now with the heaviness of it, and I know that I need something else here. Beautiful. What I hear is you are present with what's happening, and you're following the rhythms, and you're speaking your story. So I want to uplift that.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. I know I didn't talk about anticipatory grief, and I wanted to speak to that instead. So I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's a lot of stuff coming through the chat, and I can't
Shauna,
multitask in this way.
That's okay, Shauna. That's why I'm here. So we're going to actually, Karen was next. She wanted to share, and then Michelle, please.
Okay. Please. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate you all.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I sent a message off, and I just need you to validate my feelings. I have a really deep friend, a good friend whose son has passed away from addiction and overdose, and my daughter has also, and they knew each other. I'm caring for my friend, and I know right now she's in a very, very deep spot. The mother to her son's children has been acting up, and causing more turmoil to my friend's life. My friend tells me about this, and she's having a difficult time with her son's passing, mind you, being 2 years ago through COVID. There's been no service, and I feel she's not with where my friend is grieving because there's no service. She's acting up with, staying out, and my friend's been watching her kids, and she's been coming and picking them up and under the influence. So what I did, and my friend tells me about this, and you know what, I've had enough. So I messaged the daughter, the mother of her grandchildren, and said, enough. She has had enough. Get your act together. Leave her alone. So now, because of being friendship, and then not realizing that she also has an issue, I have been alienated because I spoke the truth. And it upsets me that I'm trying to help my friend, and she right now is in a spot that she just lets it go, but yet she talks to me about the grief of her son and how the mother of her children, of his children, was I wrong? I don't know. Was I wrong to overstep and say, I've had this grief, we've grieved together? And I believe the mother, my friend, it's just like you said, she has focused out. She has been in bed for weeks.
Yes. Karen, may I just invite something in this moment? Is that okay?
Please.
Yeah. I'm just feeling into when situations like this are so complex and there's so many emotions and relationships, and I know that every single person on this call can relate in some way, shape, or form to the complexity of how pain is expressed in the world, especially when we don't know what to do with it. And so in this moment, Karen, I just, what does it mean? And this is made for all of us. And this goes into like, how do we make hope a practice, resiliency a practice, even in the face when something feels like we feel helpless at times. And Karen, I know you didn't say this, but what I'm feeling into is like, oh, what a difficult situation where there is no right or wrong answer. There's only, how do I try to best respond at any one given moment? Is this going to be enough? And maybe I'm feeling helpless. I want things to change and I don't know what to do about it. So I want to honor and acknowledge that place that can feel hard to sit in, of feeling, I'm doing the best I can to be of support, and that there's times where I feel helpless and I don't know what to do with that.
So
I'm just going to invite us.
So for myself to contact the mother of her grandchildren and say, enough is enough. Get your act together, because you're destroying my friend. You are destroying her.
Karen, I'm not in a place to say what is right or wrong in any of these situations. I hear what I can validate is how confusing and frustrating this situation has been for you, and I'm grateful that you've shared it here, because I think this is part and parcel of what happens on individual levels because of a societal level of non-responsiveness, not enough support and recognition for families, and it falls into these very personal relationships. That's what I can offer in this moment.
I completely agree. And if I did wrong with telling the mother of my best friends her grandchildren. Her
Hmm.
grandchildren
Yes.
must be aware of their father who passed, which is not talked about. Um, he must be enough is enough, and I know they're angry at me now, but
Hmm.
I did what I had to do. I felt with the trauma
Yes.
and with the trauma she's experiencing on top of her son's death, and seeing
Yes.
his family, his girls, go through the addiction again. I'm
Yes.
I'm just hoping that my friend will realize that I meant no harm. Um, I said my piece to
Yes.
the mother of the children, and I'll leave it at that. But right now.
Yes.
I'm a bad guy, um, and I'm hoping you'll understand. I did it because enough is enough.
Thank you, Karen. I hear you.
So thank you.
Yeah. And my hope is also that you have a community of others that can also kind of be with you in this. That's, it's kind of beyond the scope of what I can be attuned to in this moment and in this way of gathering. So just thank you holding all of that.
Actually,
Yeah, holding all of that. Thank you.
we have a group here in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Um, it's
So we're going to
called
go on, Karen. Karen, I'm going to move on now to just because there's a few people who would like to share their voice into the circle. So
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Right, so we have Michelle next, and I'm just also keeping track of time here. So I get that we could definitely, as a group, talk for a very long time and engage, which is wonderful. We know that that's all part of healing, but we'll also be sharing Shauna's contact information after, so you can book some sessions and that too, if anyone would like to, and then have that direct, deeper conversation with Shauna. Most definitely. So next we have Michelle, and then we have Name, and then we have one or two right after that. So we can keep that in mind. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you
Hi.
for having me today.
Mhm.
I lost my son Tanner in October 24th, 2019 to fentanyl poisoning, which was really difficult. I'm a mom with 5 kids. I have 2 other children who are younger in their teens who are actively using. So that's really difficult too. But what I wanted to share today is it took me a year and a half before I even realized that my son had died after he
Yes.
passed.
Yes.
I went on with life. It was just before COVID. I never had a ceremony for him. I never had, and nothing. I didn't do anything. And
Yes.
that was really, really something I feel guilty about. But Mother's Day was really difficult. This Mother's Day, I finally opened my son's ashes for the first time. And that was something, the dreaded box. I had a box. I live in Prince George and he lived in Vancouver, and his ashes were sent to me by mail. And that was really hard. And I finally opened his box to find his ashes. And since he passed, I've been experiencing body problems.
Yes.
And I recognize now that it's my trauma and my grief
Yes.
that I've been
Yes.
experiencing. And I was having runs of VTAC, not knowing what was going on, numbness and tingling and twitching.
Yes.
And my whole body has experienced it. And it's heavy.
Yes. Michelle, how does it feel? And just again, just a gentle invitation, just to know like everything you've just shared to all of these ears who can really hear you right now, who are with you. And just like, seeing my face, seeing some other perhaps familiar faces here, it's difficult. Like beyond words. Yeah. And I want to, in this moment, just say, like, it absolutely makes sense that the recognition of Tanner's death didn't happen till so long afterwards, because your body, your heart, your mind goes into protection, and that is not a fault. That is what is hardwired happens, especially when there's these layers of stigma and disconnection. It is not your burden to carry that you've done something wrong. So for whatever solace or a little bit of reflection back that may offer, our bodies go into shock. And when we don't realize, or the people around us don't also realize that we're in a trauma response, it becomes very easily, what am I doing wrong? I've done something wrong. I'm not doing it right. So we just want to kind of start to melt those stories away. This is one of the impacts of traumatic bereavement when there's stigma and disenfranchisement. It is not your fault. And you are living alongside, and you will continue to, in the absolute best ways you know how, to continue living alongside and carrying this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Honoring to Tanner. Yeah. Lots of hearts in the chat, and just knowing, like, there's heart stories here. And I just want to say, I'm feeling a depth, I'm feeling a little bit emotional. I'm feeling a depth of gratitude for the reciprocity and the sharing that's happening here. Because this doesn't always happen in, let's say, a presentation. And there's this certain, what I might call like medicine here when heart words are spoken. And I'm grateful. I hold that with a lot of care and tenderness, and doing the best I can to be attuned in this setting. So thank you. Yeah. Who is next?
So name is next. So if you want to go ahead, name, and then we have one question in the chat box that I'll bring forward after.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, name.
Hey, can everybody hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. I was provided the information from one of the counselors that was actually helping, my wife before she passed. And I guess where my question was, I've been listening to everything you've been saying, and it resonated with me, and I see kind of the physical effects and all of that. And I think for me, where I'm personally finding my challenges is it was a really long fight. I lost the love of my life very young. We were together for about 11 years. Anyways, so it's just trying to find a way to implement all of this, with the triggers that come along with it. And, like Mother's Day was very hard and things like that. So I know when you're in the right space of mind and you're able to maybe control the environment, you can use those practices. But, sometimes when you get caught off guard with the kids, my eldest is 5, my youngest is 2.5. So it's constantly there. And it's just, sometimes you're just not ready emotionally to just have that answer or just deal with it on the go. And I guess that's kind of my question is there a way to kind of, I don't know, address that or be there? Because I went through the same phase as Michelle too, is because I lost my father-in-law in the same way. And it's when it happened, just I was at work the next day, carried on like nothing happened. Nobody knew nothing about my life.
Yeah.
Everything thought, and what happened with her too, like I still don't believe it sometimes,
Yes. Yes.
So it's hard. And obviously,
Yes.
I want to honor her. And it's just so hard because it's constantly in my face. And the more it's in my face, the more it hurts, And
Yes.
when I find with the other side of the family, it's in there, it's almost like they moved on, but it's almost you feel like people find it easier to just erase things to move on than to actually, hold on to it. And it's almost like holding a flame. And
Mm.
it's finding that balance, and that's the hard thing,
Yes.
I don't know if that was a
Yes.
question, but
Naeem, would it feel okay just to name what is her name and what is your father-in-law's name also? Is it okay to share that?
yeah, her name is Ashley.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And his name is Michelle.
Uh-huh. So let's just all spend a moment here in shared breath. Just noticing places of connection in this moment, connection with one another, connection with, if it's available, just feel your own body on the chair. All of us now. I'm doing this very purposefully. Just feel your own body. You might rock a little bit to be with what was just shared. Yeah. Yeah. I want to uplift the resiliency, and I know this will probably meet many of you because it's been spoken to several times, is when we, Naeem, you said, oh, I just went back to work, and I, as if it didn't happen. I just want to uplift the resiliency of sometimes the most supportive thing that we can do in the midst of such pain is to continue doing the things that are familiar, because that is what holds us. So I want to uplift the resiliency, and there's a type of wisdom that is there when we continue to show up to certain routines that may feel so out of sync with what's happening, but it's too much to take in that level in any given moment. It needs to be done sip through time. And so I want to uplift that. There are ways that we do things because that is what's holding that sense of familiarity. And then in terms of, I really hear you, there's times when we feel like we can, be proactive and in the practices, and there's other times where we're just bowled over. Doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of choice in those moments. The grief is overwhelming, the trigger. So in those moments, what I can say, what supports those moments more and more is when outside of those moments, we are practicing as much as possible. Because the more we practice, so let's say, just for sake of example, every morning waking up and choosing to find some beauty, maybe you look out the window, you look at beauty and you choose to take it in. You choose to pause and to receive that beauty, that's supporting the nervous system, that's starting to melt away trauma responses. So the next time that trigger moment happens, there's just more capacity each time in the moment to feel it and to stay present, to stay connected. This is the medicine, is when we feel the overwhelm, how do we stay as connected as possible? One of the simplest ways to do that is to look around our environment and stay connected to the environment. It doesn't mean the pain goes away. That's not the point. It means we are staying present with it so that it actually becomes grief that's moving rather than trauma that gets stuck in the body. Does that make sense, what I'm
Yeah.
saying here? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for all that you shared here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to invite us all just to take a moment, just a little bit of a stretch or just a bit of any kind of body movement that you may need in this moment. And I'm sensing into, there's a certain capacity to be in these together, and then there's a certain need at times to then pace into. So I feel like one more question or share, and then we'll wrap this up, we'll close it up, because there's a lot of medicine, a lot of heart medicine that was shared here today, and it is worthy of our time to be able to sit with what was shared today and not to get to a place of overwhelm. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So one more.
Our last one, just because we only have a few minutes left. So the question is around forgiveness, and would like to know any tips on how you can forgive someone. Unfortunately, there was a lot of anger and fighting before they had passed, and then afterwards found out that there was a lot of lying and deceit that had been in place for many years. So in regards to the tips to work on forgiveness.
Whew. I don't know if I have tips for forgiveness. I think this is such a personal process. And I'll be the first to admit I have a strained relationship with forgiveness myself. And maybe from a very humbled place, it's like, from my own experience, and also having this be something that has been brought up in other traumatic bereavement support groups, is first of all just a lot of compassion that I think forgiveness comes in its own timing, and that when we have the capacity and support, that we welcome in to be with the anger, that we welcome in to be with the confusion, that we welcome in. So when we feel we have the presence, we have the support, we have someone who can hear, we have the support group, it's really important to not shame or shun the other emotions, right? It's like we welcome them all to the table. I wish I'm feeling a lot inside. I wish there was tips for forgiveness, and I'm not sure if forgiveness works like that. And maybe it's because I'm still working on my own process of forgiveness for the losses in my life. And so I'm not sitting in a place where I have experienced the full completion of what it means to feel all the feelings, to feel like I have a right to feel the places where I feel rage and anger and let down, while also not feeling too guilty about feeling that. And I also question, is forgiveness what I need, or is a broader understanding of the bigger story that holds this pain, is that what is helpful? This is not just an individual's suffering, that the suffering is interconnected in with a broader with the story of stigma, with the places of being unmet. And so that would be my curiosity, and that's what I feel like I may have only to offer in this moment is, for me, part of getting closer perhaps to forgiveness is sitting in the larger story of the individual story, but also the collective story of, and how that lands on each of our hearts differently. I don't know if that's making sense or if that's landing or supportive, but that's what I have in this moment. To broaden the storyline. And to find the resilience in one another, alongside one another. Yeah.
I know there was one suggestion that come up in the chat, just with everyone sharing, was to write a letter so you can identify your feelings and express your thoughts, and then that allows you to be able to work through it all as well. So that might be an idea to, to try out. I'm just looking at our time, and we are right on the top of the hour, the top of our closing. So I want to thank everyone so much for being here today, joining us. I have popped the website to our Healing Hearts Canada, it's healingheartscanada.org. Please definitely go check it out. There's lots of different information and resources and such there, as well as where to find a group, and as well as to how to contact us to start a group. Definitely, please don't ever hesitate on, you would probably all have my email from doing the registration. You can always reply to the Zoom link email, and it'll come directly to me, and we can definitely follow up. And like I said, we will be sending out, I was sending out a, once we get the recording uploaded to YouTube, we will send out a follow-up email to everyone that registered. So I know, life happens, and sometimes you can't attend and keep everything happening as you would like as far as scheduling. So then that way everyone can either go back, take it in for the first time, or continue to go back and take it in however many times that they would like. The other thing I was also going to mention is we'll be adding these skills and resources that were shared today. All of this awesomeness that we've received from Shauna, we'll be sharing with our facilitators, our Healing Heart facilitators as well. I would totally see it going over to our Holding Hope facilitators, just as a good grounding point, and that, it's a journey of healing no matter what our situation is. And so definitely will be part of the resource list that they have available to them. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending today. It has been an amazing last couple of hours. The connection and you can feel the love as much as we're coming together in the virtual world. You can feel the love and the sharing and that taking place. And I want to just, remind everyone, please do something to take care of you. Make sure you're staying hydrated, and do something that makes you smile. If it's talking to someone or just enjoying your coffee at the end of the day, whatever that is for you, make it your adventure to figure out what that is for today, to just put a smile on your face, because that's very important, and that's also very healing. And I know it's very minor in comparison to everything Shauna shared with us today. I want to thank Shauna for taking the time to be with us today. And like I said, I'll be sending that email to everyone so you have the follow-up details. And Shauna and Antoinette, if you could just maybe stay on for a moment after, would be wonderful. So thank you everyone for joining us today.